Today, I have the privilege of talking to Al Baxter, otherwise known as Dr. Alistair Baxter. Well, most people actually know him just as Al, who's an all-round good guy with experience from ingredient selling, marketing, and time at the food bowl, and now with the team at Massey. Al, for people who don't know who you are, how do you introduce yourself and describe your role at Massey today?
Hi, Stefan. Thanks for having me. So I work for Massey University in a part-time role, promoting their services to industry. My background is I studied food science in the UK in a place called Grimsby, which is you drove into the town and it said Europe's food capital, but I don't think anyone really believed that. But they had a food technology school there at Massey University where I did my PhD in food science. And then I worked in R&D in the UK for a few years in ingredients companies. Really loved that. Learned a hell of a lot, and worked with a Kiwi, and she gave me some business cards, and suddenly I had a job in New Zealand offered to me. So I ended up in New Zealand in the 90s, met my wife, stayed in New Zealand because I loved it, and I've been in the food industry in New Zealand ever since, working for food ingredients companies mainly. 20 years at Kerry Ingredients in R&D and then in technical sales, and they threw in a car, so I moved to sales. and then after that, business development with the Food Bowl, which is a government innovation centre, and then I, about a year ago, moved to Massey. I knew the people at Massey, and I knew the services that they were providing, and I liked the idea of working part-time because I'd had 30 years of doing 50-hour weeks. So I wanted to wind back the working hours, and so started at Massey, where they have some awesome services to industry, which it's my job to promote, which is a new role for Massey.
So you've done sort of quite a variety of things, but a lot of that time in ingredients. So with all of that, what has this journey taught you about the New Zealand food sector? Is there any difference, I guess, because you sort of indicated you worked in the UK a wee bit there for a little bit of time? Or is it, I guess, primarily here based on that length of time? But, what has that journey actually taught you?
Well, I remember someone telling me the average food company in New Zealand is 4 people. There are a huge number of small companies, as you know, Stefan. So there's some really clever, practical people out there that just get on with it. They get the job done, do amazing jobs. So all these SMEs, it's a huge sector for New Zealand. Food, obviously, our biggest export sector, up there with tourism. Of course, dairy is huge. There's a big drop from the biggest company, Fonterra, to the next few large companies, and then a very, very long tail of small companies. So it's a real community of producers, suppliers, consultants, government, people doing business with people. So personal relationships really count for a lot in New Zealand. It's not as transactional as maybe it could be in the UK, where I remember in the UK going out on the road with a sales rep, and you drive for 5 or 6 hours, and then the purchasing manager was saying, well, I haven't got time to see you, and you drive all the way back, kind of thing. Here, people really support their suppliers and their partners, because I think they do rely on them for that support, because of the isolation, and because lots of small companies really need that kind of help. So there are many good people that go the extra mile to help each other out. It's of course wise to treat everyone well and always do the right thing as word gets around. So never burn your bridges as well, because everybody knows each other. Very dynamic, fast-moving sector. My daughter's just graduating in business soon, and I've basically said to her, well, food is great because you'll always get a job, but it's going to be stressful and it's going to be dynamic and fast-moving. So you have to really decide whether that's the sort of sector you want to be in. I think New Zealand's definitely at the forefront when it comes to agri-tech and dairy, but we often follow trends overseas with other food and beverage trends. 12 hours ahead and 5 years behind with some food trends, I suppose. The industry has changed over the years, with supermarkets merging, suppliers to supermarkets merging, everything going national. The regional manufacturers that were there when I started in sales 20 years ago have largely died out. The same with the food service suppliers as well. It's all become national companies, national suppliers. I'm talking in general here. And obviously there are pros and cons with this. economies of scale, but you do end up with some disadvantages as well when you end up with just one or two suppliers of certain things. What happens if they shut down? You've only got really two supermarkets as well. Is that really what's best for the consumer? So lots of change, some for the good, some for the bad over the years. I think the average Kiwi is very, very good at making things, much better than me being English. Good at improvising, giving things a crack. Probably sometimes not so good at making sure they enlist the support of experts and they pay experts to to give advice and to support them. And also they think they probably produce something and they may think the selling of it or the promotion of it just happened. So I think we tend to New Zealanders make things first and then try and sell it, which is not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to see whether there's a gap in the market first and then develop the product to meet the gap.
One thing there, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. 12 hours ahead and 5 years behind. So that's a great saying, because I think that is where we are with some of the food trends, as you say. But then also, you see that the average Kiwi is very good at making things. And, this comes across quite a lot. We've got that old number 8 mentality. We know how to do things on the smell of an oily rag, as they say. But then with that, one of the last things you said there was, we're not good at making sure we enlist experts and taking advice from experts. And I think that is really the crux of it. And that is something that, I think with what you're doing there at Massey, that's going to really help and grow all of that sort of stuff as well. But then, the other point you made there as well is that, people are good at making things and then they think the rest of it's just easy. And I know, I've thought that for a long time, where people go, hey, this is good. Someone loves it, we're into it, So, but it's just that whole process of it. And I think you sort of and I guess sometimes they miss how to make that product commercially as well, because they make it at home, think it's great. They make it in a small kitchen. They don't think about commercial supply of ingredients and how it works, the different blending, making, etc. So I guess, this is all going to run through in this discussion here as we go through it. You've got the history and the knowledge of it, and that's where I hope people tune in to listen to it. You've described yourself as someone who sits at the intersection of food innovation and business development. So how does this show up and how you're focused on today?
My job, even with the ingredients company, was finding out what the customers want and getting it to them. So you're helping your customers innovate and do their R&D by supporting them with ingredients and the customized ingredients that the customers wanted. And then when I went to the food bowl, it was helping those clients innovate as well and commercialize their products. So I've always kind of been interested in that. And I think the good thing about when I was at Kerry and we were essentially partnering with all these big companies and growing with them and making sure all the ingredients needs were met was I never felt I was really selling stuff. I've always felt, that those companies should be dealing with Kerry and that we're giving them a good deal and we were supporting them. And so I never felt that I was really having to sell because I felt, that we were actually helping the client out all the time.
You sort of mentioned there, your time at Kerry and working in the technical sales and, how it felt sort of like, you're working with, I guess it was more partnerships and you're sort of like, a trusted advisor with those clients, if that's the way it sort of worked out. So I guess, you spent many years in the ingredients, technical sales at Kerry, Maverick Flavors and Value Pack. How did that shape the way you now think about the new product development and commercialization?
When I moved into sales, my first boss said to me, get out there, Al, find out what the customers want and we'll all get it to them. So, he was really good at simple stuff like that, that I've always remembered. So finding out what the customer needs and getting it to the customer. And so that business to business selling job, holds true for many things that what does the customer actually need and make sure you know what they need and then tailor what you're doing to them. He had lots of words of wisdom, actually, lots of catchphrases that I've always remembered. In fact, I used it when I was at Pet Food Conference because he always used to say, fish are caught by them that go fishing. And people used to sort of look at him and go, what the hell does he mean? What does he mean? But he was basically saying, if you're in sales, you need to go out there and actually, try and fish for some sales. So at the conference, I was saying, well, I'm just going to go out and talk to people now because, we've got these services and they need to know about them. So I said that I told my colleagues I was going fishing. And what else did he used to say? I come to work to make some money, contribute to society, and have fun. He used to say, fish for whales, not minnows. So look for the big opportunities. He used to tell me a crisis was an opportunity. A customer complaint was a chance to show the customer that you care about the customer. So we would smother the customer if there was ever a complaint to make sure that they knew that we actually cared about it. He used to say, make sure you have 2 ears and 1 mouth in a meeting so that you always are listening to what the customer needs and letting them tell you what they need rather than you just telling them what they should buy. He always said, people do people with people. So develop those relationships. So we did a great job in that company of customizing things to what the customers need. Yeah, that's always really influenced, how I approach any job. The innovation support that the government provides to New Zealand companies through the likes of Planted Food, Ag Research, Food Innovation Network, the Food Bowl is all being amalgamated into one. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens with that over the next few months. And then Massey's opportunity is, even though Massey is part of that through the link through Food Pilot into the Food Bowl and the Food Innovation Network, Massey needs to make sure that it's going to complement what that big organization is going to be doing. And with the services that Massey provides, which are going to be different to those services provided by that new entity.
I think a lot of those things is what people miss in this day is that total service model really matters. And I guess that is a key point. And it is really hard because, we are hands off now with the way things are moving and advancing, with dealing with the supermarkets for say, if you're selling your products in there, you're just selling into a category manager or potentially it's just into a store. And it may be more hands off than that whole selling to someone. And I don't know if you've sort of seen that over the years, but I guess you have, because I have in sales where it has changed, where it was done talking to someone face to face. You went to the plant to get the orders and you actually spoke to the owner, you spoke to the guy, you did that on your cycle going round, and it was a lot more, in your face, and I guess, I remember my first sales trip I went on the South Island, we didn't have a computer, we didn't have cell phones then either. We just, we went down there and I was with another guy and he opened up the boot of his car and got out the paperwork for that client so we could have a quick read through before we went in there. The guy gave us an order. We went to the pub down the road where he knew they had a fax machine that we could use, and you used to have to pay 50 cents for a fax. But the guy, if you bought a beer each, he'd give you a free fax. So we're there at the pub having a beer at the middle of the day and then sending a fax off for the order.
Don't need to answer that. Yeah, well, I do remember, sharing, getting the computer at the office, and we shared it. We all had to queue up to use it, and then sending my first email to a customer, and it was actually someone at a big chicken company, and I said to her, "Have you got email?" She goes, "Yeah, man." I said, "Well, I'll send you an email." The first work email I ever sent.
Yeah, and that's it. So things have changed like that. So you look at it now. So what Massey does now is probably quite different to what, where yourself and I started in this industry, touching into the food industry. So, with what Massey does now, explain it. What do you guys do in this whole food innovation sort of part? Because it is really different. And I don't know if a lot of people really know exactly what you do. I had to look it up and research it. And, when we had the discussion about doing this interview, I even missed parts and you had to tell me what you guys do. So let's tell everyone else what you guys do.
Yeah, so Massey obviously is a university, so teaching is the biggest part of it. But my job is to promote the pretty awesome services that it provides to the food and beverage industry as well, which, so this is the first time they've employed somebody to do this. They have got a marketing department which does promote these services as well that I work with. But essentially the services are Food Pilot, which is a pilot plant with a huge array of food processing equipment that companies use for innovation and process development. So Food Pilot is associated with the Food Bowl, part of the Food Innovation Network, but it's owned by Massey University. So it's a busy pilot plant, and it's got a very wide range of equipment. It's got an RMP, which allows people to export and There's all kinds of add-ons that make it very useful for industry. So that's managed by Nikki Middleditch, and it's she does an amazing job of servicing the clients through that. We then have Feast, which is the sensory and consumer science block, an amazing facility. It helps companies de-risk their product launches by offering a way to test their products with consumers, with taste paneling and so on. It's a state-of-the-art facility. The room can use virtual reality to make you think you're in space or eating a product at a beach or a cafe. And there's academic work that gets done there, long-term projects for big companies, but we've just launched something called TasteBench, which is designed for small companies to test out their products with consumers before they launch them and do it properly in a scientific way, which actually will let them know that their product is going to be successful with consumers, rather than just giving it to your mates and they all go, yeah, that's great, or launching it because the CEO's partner thought it was a good idea. So it's about getting that validation through consumers and taste paneling that your product is going to be preferred, that they prefer that one to that one, etc. We've also got a very busy nutritional analytical lab, so it's known affectionately as the Nut Lab. Does a great job of testing food products and has a very long list of regular clients that use it. Very strong about on nutritional testing. You can measure what goes in an animal, what comes out of an animal, so it works very well for the pet food sector, for agri sector as well. And of course, we have research and consultancy with the academics and the experts in their fields, like maybe novel foods or microbiology. So companies can pay for research, whether through student projects, or can troubleshoot maybe having problems with microbiology or shelf life, or bugs growing on films or something like that. Our experts can talk to those companies and give them some advice. And then finally, there's other things that I might get involved with, like the Massey Food Awards, and sector-specific work, like the pet food thing that I mentioned earlier on. That sector is very strong for Massey. We have the dog and cat colonies at Massey, so there's the pet food guys, nearly all of them will work with Massey and do a great job of servicing all of their needs with the nutritional analytical stuff, the dog and cat taste paneling, the expertise that the likes of Professor Thomas has on pet food as well. So do a great job there. So it's a similar role to the role I had at the Food Bowl, and I'm dealing with customers. Many people are not aware of how Massey can help, or think that Massey is just about teaching or academic stuff. So for me, it's making sure we get the word out about these services, and talking to the people that I know and all my contacts in the industry about it and how we can help. And then myself thinking about the companies that could really use this type of help. So yeah, it's going pretty well.
I didn't realize there was so much done, but then when you sort of start talking about it, I go, actually, I've done some stuff with Food Pilot many years ago. I supplied packaging for them to do a different project. We were looking at some other stuff with a client and, et cetera, like that. And you sort of go, oh, actually, yeah, I do know this and do know that, but you sort of just forget about it. And I guess having someone in your group is sort of enhancing this, because it's actually making it, that people know about it. And with your extensive network, it's pushing that out. And, you mentioned there pet food. And I guess one of the other biggest things that I've always known Massey for is the vet side of it, with all the vets going through Massey University, and then, people sending their animals there for for specialized testing and et cetera, et cetera. So I guess that sort of all coincides with the pet food as well. Like, it all sort of links in, because you've got specialists across both sides of the animal, from front to end, I guess, is the best way to look at it.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting. So where do you see, with yourself in this role, with your background, your history, working in Food Bowl previously, and as you said, it's sort of like some of those same things with Food Pilot and that. So where do you see the biggest opportunities for Massey to connect research, industry, and commercialization more effectively?
it's about getting the word out there to get more people using the services. I mean, they're getting used at the moment, but we want to get more clients and more regular clients. The new TasteBench thing that's being launched through Feast has just been launched, so I think that's a great opportunity to get more consumers, more clients de-risking their product launches.
It must be really interesting for yourself to be at the forefront of this as this change is happening. You know, you're bringing your wealth of knowledge, merging of all these businesses into one, and just seeing, you know, you've sort of said there's like massive opportunities. You know, you've spoken about them, and I just see that, you know, you're excited about it. So it's quite cool for yourself to be at that, I guess, at the forefront of it. How do you actually feel about that, sort of being in that pivotal role right now as it's all starting to merge?
I think it is a really good thing because if you can get all of those organizations working together to support companies in a more coordinated fashion, then it is a good thing. So I think Massey is always going to be an important part of the country's food system. I mean, it educates the sector. It does advance science for the sector as well. There's heaps of amazing stuff going on when it comes to research. It is supporting innovators, and it's strengthening New Zealand's global reputation as well with the science that it does. So it's one of the country's most important engines for food sector growth, and it always will be over the next few years as well. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with all of the food trends and how New Zealand responds to all the changes that are happening globally with what consumers want. And a lot of these new trends, there's a danger that New Zealand could fall behind. My view is that the free market doesn't always deliver when a country is so geographically isolated from the rest of the world, because we can't just rely on doing what we're doing now, because eventually that's not going to work. So there's already other countries getting ahead when it comes to some of the new areas, like the Australians are putting a lot of money into alternative proteins. So it's Singapore's putting a lot of money into fermentation.
Yes, we are feeling that whole geographical isolation now based on what's going on in the rest of the world with our fuel shortages and, you know, getting these every other day reports about, you know, how much fuel we've got. And I guess it does actually work about where we are sitting in this innovation. So where do you see this innovation going, and what are your thoughts around certain things, like, you know, the impacts of AI on it, the Internet of Things? You know, you sort of mentioned there fermentation, alternative proteins, and I guess that sort of moves into that whole functional foods. Previously, you mentioned food security. So where do you feel that is going to make New Zealand sit with all of these things for the next, 20 to 30 years?
I think I went to a conference a couple of months ago, just a breakfast thing, and it was interesting that nobody was talking about sustainability at all. It seems to have dropped off the radar a bit, but I'll come back to that. But one of the most memorable things was the effect of weight loss drugs and how that's going to affect every country. I think the patents are coming off those drugs in the next couple of years, and then they'll be moving to pills rather than injections. So when you think there's a very high percentage of the population that would like to lose weight or are overweight and need to do it for health reasons, there's going to be a massive change if 30% of the population is taking those drugs, because what it does is you stop wanting to eat stodgy foods that fill you up, and you want to just be eating lots of protein, lots of fiber, lots of nutritious, really concentrated food. So if consumers are suddenly demanding that, that is really going to change what people need to be producing when it comes to food. So that's going to be an interesting space. The alternative protein side, obviously we're seeing plant protein in New Zealand, people trying to start up plant-based meats and really failing, if you like, a lot of them. which is in some ways is disappointing, but some ways not surprising, because we don't make plant proteins in this country really. Canada has huge factories churning out their plant-based proteins. Same in China, they've been making proteins for years and years. We don't have the crops, we don't have the factories that can convert those crops to proteins. So anyone making a plant-based meat in this country has to import the main ingredients and then try to cobble it together and make it on a small line, where it's going to be much more expensive. So those companies were like the Sunfeds and some of the others were always going to struggle competing with imported plant-based burgers, and the big companies making it were in large quantities overseas and then just importing it to New Zealand. So where we have seen an establishment of plant bases in the oat milk area. Oat milk, we grow oats in this country, so that's a big plus. So that's makes it different from these plant-based meats. We grow oats. Converting them into milk is an easier thing in some ways, because you don't need to extract and dry proteins. You can make a milk out of the oats, and then you just need a UHT plant. So which easier said than done, that is. But some of the companies have worked out how to do that. So we've got at least we've got an established oat milk industry in this country now, which is great. But when it comes to alternative protein, it seems like what is going to happen in the future is going to be fermentation providing proteins, and that I think is a major opportunity for New Zealand, but very, very difficult for that to happen simply by companies forging on and trying to do it themselves. There's a few companies in New Zealand that are trying to do it already, and it's really needing some government strategy and backing to make it happen in this country. It's a great add-on to the dairy industry, where we're very good at upstream processing, we're very good at dairy processing, downstream processing, separation of proteins and ingredients. The expertise is very transferable to proteins that might be made from fermentation. So if we can find a way to crack that fermentation industry in this country over the next 20, 30 years, and I think that is the future, because it's so much better for the environment. It's and many other advantages that would make it a great add-on to what we currently do when it comes to dairy and meat in New Zealand. Cultivated meat is obviously going to be a big thing as well. So that's another thing that it won't just fall into our laps. We've really got to look at that seriously as a New Zealand Inc. and New Zealand government. How are we going to make sure that we are getting into that? You touched on robotics and AI. There's an opportunity for big improvements in productivity through AI and through robotics. And New Zealand is not great on productivity, as we all know. It's something that constantly comes up as something that we need to improve. So that's obviously going to be a big focus for companies and for government as well, to make sure that we're improving our productivity to make us more competitive, and by using AI and robotics. What else? Circular processing, using waste as an ingredient, and perhaps in fermentation processes to reduce waste and to give a nice sustainable story that can help us sell things as well, and is better for the environment. Functional foods is a big thing. Everybody looking for healthier options. It's a big trend globally, and that's something that we're currently doing, but is it something that's going to continue? And then, of course, I think I touched on earlier, food security. If you are getting into new areas, it's not all about export dollars. It's got to be what's good for New Zealanders as people. What is the sector supposed to deliver for New Zealanders? And it's not just the New Zealanders that are exporting. It's not all about export dollars. There's people there that need nutrition in their daily lives. It's no good if all the good food goes overseas and we're left with nothing here, obviously. So in my view, New Zealand should have a food minister, and New Zealand should have a food plan which encompasses export, but also encompasses food security. You know, the climate is changing. How are we going to make sure that we are making sure that our citizens are getting the food that they need and getting good food that's affordable and healthy. And yeah, at the moment, there isn't really a plan for all of that. We have a Minister for Agriculture. We have various different plans for various things, but I really think there's a gap for New Zealand in terms of putting a food plan together which encompasses everything.
You covered so much then. You've sort of got such a good insight on a lot of those things. And I think some of the highlighted things there, and you sort of brought it up multiple times, is sort of about nutrition. You talked about the weight loss, you talked about health, healthiness, and they all come from all of those products, with the fermentation, that thing with the weight loss drugs coming off, the patents coming off those. That'll be really interesting what that does do, because we are seeing that boom of that on a global scale. And the thing that is making it a little bit restrictive here is probably the cost of those drugs, and they're not sort of subsidized. So that could be, if it's coming off like that and moves to a pill form, that will be a game changer. And you're right, our food models will need to change based on that. And they probably need to anyway, with the healthy foods and the amount of the obesity issues that we have in this country. So, we've got successful companies in New Zealand that have done stuff around the agri side of it. One forefront of the mind is Halter, of course, with the change with the fenceless system, meaning better use. And with their data collection, it's better use of the pasture, etc., that they can now capture. So that's quite amazing. So we do have those people that can do this stuff here. Sort of talk about our advantage of where we are, location, or disadvantage in some cases, but it's also our advantage, and we need to be working with that. So this is actually brilliant. Now let's, we've been trying to solve the world here with all of these questions and what the future holds and stuff. So let's wind it back to Massey. We've talked a lot about the new taste innovations.
It's for SMEs that we've made it cheaper by essentially we're going to get a taste panel of 50 to 70 consumers in 2 days a month, and run multiple taste panels with multiple companies separate times during the day, rather than having getting in all those people just for one small project. So in simple terms, that's why we're making it more affordable. And the plan there is to make sure that companies can launch a product and de-risk their product launch. I think 9 out of 10 product launches fail in this country in food. So if they can show that consumers like these products, even take it to their supermarket or their intermediate customer, like their food service distributor, and say, look, we've proved that this product is going to be liked. That gives them more confidence that launching it is going to be successful, and it will be more likely to be successful as well. So this is just something that I'm excited about, because the university has recognized that we need to be making these services more affordable when it comes to the sensory side. So I'm hoping it's going to go really, really well.
I think it will be critical there to take to supermarkets and to the food service providers, or whomever your retail customer is, or your end customer is, because you've got that validation. Whereas we mentioned it before, instead of saying it's my family likes it, here we go, out you go to it. This is actually going to get that wide demographic covered with it. Let's sort of get into this development link with it to make sure we do cover some of the packaging stuff. So packaging is an important part of the total product experience. So how do you see packaging interacting with the sensory perception and customer response?
You can test the packaging as well through consumer panels. You can also use things like Sticky Beat, can't you, where you're essentially using the app to do very quick and cheap tests with consumers, where you're essentially saying, well, do you like the look of this one, or like the look of this one? And then they might pick that, and then you can say, well, in that case, do you like this or do you like that? So some of those apps are really, really good for when it's appearance of the packaging of things. If you do need to do proper panels where people are touching and feeling things, then that's Feast and the TasteBench can help with that as well. But obviously packaging is there to contain and protect products and give shelf life, but secondary to communicate with the client on the brand and what's in the food as well. And then it's a way of selling the product, of course.
So really, this is one key area with packaging that I think people miss a lot. And it's like, how early do they get their packaging format sorted? Do you think it's something they should have sorted when they're bringing their product to you guys as well, so you can understand that?
That's a classic, I think. When I was at the Food Bowl, and I would be talking to probably a half a dozen at least startups every week. And there were some big mistakes that some of those companies would make. They would be set on a particular packaging type, for example, that was impossible to scale up for whatever reason. Maybe they were doing a UHT product, which I'm sorry, but it's going to be very, very hard to find a contract UHT company that will do a bottle drink in the bottle that you want, unless you're going to do a 2 million unit run sort of thing. So it's very important. We had a lot of ways of coaching the startups through, things that were very new to them, and packaging would be important. Pick something that is easy to scale up, because the contract manufacturer maybe would already be using that format of packaging. Don't pick something that they can't do. Stating the bleeding obvious, but what were the other mistakes? That I remember somebody wanting a bottle that they liked the look of it, but it was imported, and they didn't want the off-the-shelf bottle because they wanted something that was unique, and then they ended up with all kinds of supply issues, and weren't able to produce their product because they'd picked the wrong bottle, the one that was imported, and wasn't available to them in the end. So always look a few steps ahead when it comes to that scale-up process. And I've done a few seminars on how to scale up a food product, and having a proper manufacturing spec, getting the advice of contract food techs, getting the advice of the people at Food Pilot and at Massey and at the Food Bowl on the common mistakes that are made, really important. And packaging specialists like yourself, Stefan, who are willing to go the extra mile to help people, as I know you have done.
I have also been in that situation where stuff has not been able to be produced because they've come to us. We've developed the packaging for them based on their requirements, assuming, or they've said that they have spoken to this person, that person. It goes to that co-packer, and they can't produce with that product. It doesn't fit on their machine, on their pouch filler, or the vertical formful seal machine doesn't work with it. I even had one case where we were supplied a die line from a customer for doing a vertical pack, and they then decided to change who their co-packer was, and the film didn't work. But they didn't update us, didn't make any changes. They just decided midway through they'd had a disagreement with this supplier, went, okay, no, we'll go and speak to these guys who we spoke from the get-go, assume the film would work. It turned up wrong width. And as you know, you can't make it wider.
You look at a company like AF Drinks, they've been incredibly successful, and they're expanding in the US. That's something that's relatively easy to scale up in a lot of ways because there's so many contract manufacturers that can do that format of packaging. Whereas the disadvantage, of course, is that because it's easy to scale up, then there's plenty of other people that are doing it as well. So then it becomes all about how you differentiate what you're doing compared to all the other people that are doing this quick and easy. And it comes down to branding, doesn't it? And then whether you've got something different about what you're doing that gives you a competitive advantage, a clear competitive advantage that's easily defendable as well. But when scale up happens, they're basically going to have to pay for it all themselves and get investors and invest a lot of money into designing a factory that will make their very unique product. That's much more difficult to do. The advantage in that, of course, is that if you're doing that, then it's maybe more difficult for people to copy what you're doing from a production and packaging point of view. So if you get there, then it's maybe something that's more unique and gives you that advantage. But we've always got to make sure that the packaging is going to be liked by the customer, of course, as well, with proper market testing.
Cool, because sometimes people do fail on that as well. You know, they can come up with these great new ideas and it's not functional, not usable for their chosen demographic and use as well. You know, there's a lot of new things that are, you know, quite critical that people use, and people, I guess they're not new, they're older developments that have been around, but it's just getting more use. And, you know, some of these are these ease to open products, you know, more heat and eat products, so the packaging is actually suitable for the end application. You know, sometimes you can't just use an off-the-shelf pouch or stand-up pouch for a heat and eat product because it's actually not suitable to heat in that packaging. And I see that happen a few times as well with people. What's a message you want every food entrepreneur to hear before they launch?
Make sure your consumer, your customer, actually wants the product before you do that.
Brilliant. All right, we've covered a lot today. There's a lot to unpack from this for people listening, and I really feel that we might have to get you back once this merger happens. Right. Thanks, Al. Been great chatting.
All right.
Cheers.
Thank you, Stefan. Appreciate it.